Didn't have very good ones for you. Boyer was not the best.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I call to order the regular city council meeting of the Sierra Vista City Council for July 27, 2017. Madam Clerk, may we have a roll call, please?
Mayor Rick Mueller.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Alicia Ash.
Present.
Councilmember Bob Blanchard.
Here?
Councilmember Gwen Calhoun.
Present.
Councilmember Rachel Gray.
Present.
Councilmember Craig Mount.
Here.
Councilmember Christine Wolf.
Present.
Mr. Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Mrs. Adams. We'll start our meeting tonight, as we always do, with an invocation and pledge. Tonight, the invocation will be led by Pastor Gary Brown of the Emmanuel Lutheran Church, followed immediately by the Pledge of Allegiance by Councilwoman Wolf. Please rise.
Let us pray. Holy God, Heavenly Father, fountain and source of all goodness, you have ordered all things wonderfully, and you sustain them in your loving kindness for us and for all the living. We give you most humble and hearty thanks for all your blessings. The beauty of your creation is all around us, from the grandeur of the Huachuca Mountains to the lushness and the grassy rolling hills to the blessing of the San Pedro River. We're all graced with the magnificent setting that hosts our beloved Sierra Vista. We thank you for our elected officials who serve us at your divine pleasure. They love this city and her residents. For the sake of all, we pray your blessings and wisdom for Rick, our mayor, and for our council members, Craig and Gwen, Christine, Rachel, Bob, and Mayor Pro Tem Alicia. They serve us under your gracious care, we, your people in this city. Continue to grant them success and peace in their work and joy as they serve for the good of all. Through him who is and was and who ever shall be, even Christ our Lord. Amen.
Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please be seated. Thank you, Pastor Brown, and thank you, Councilwoman Wolf. Item number 1 is the acceptance of the agenda. Mr. Blanchard.
Mr. Mayor, I move that the agenda for the regular city council meeting of July 27, 2017 be approved.
Second. It's been moved and second. Any additions, deletions, discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the question. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. We'll next move on to awards and presentations. Tonight we have the award for the Business of the Month for Executive Realty. So I'd ask Councilwoman Wolf to join me up front, and the members of the Executive Realty as well, please. Now we're on, okay. I just want to welcome you and thank you. And on behalf of the city, I want to give you congratulations for 50 years of doing business in the city of Sierra Vista. That in itself is quite an achievement. So congratulations. And I'll turn it over to Ms. Wolf.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to hand that over to you. Thank you. So when I attended Good Morning Sierra Vista this month, I learned that we had a business in the community that had been in business for 50 years. And I was really impressed by that, absolutely. It's something that takes a lot of effort, it takes a lot of courage, and it takes a lot of putting your customers in the forefront of your business and really learning to take care of them. So they have been in business for 50 years, and it is really my great honor to be able to nominate you, Executive Realty, and your team for Business of the Month. So this is when I have to start looking at my notes, so forgive me on this one. I want to make sure I get everything right. So they are located at 400 West Fry Boulevard. Executive Realty was founded in 1967 by Louis Breutman. The business is a full-service real estate office, which means they will represent buyers and sellers of homes, as well as performing property management and rental services. Mr. Breutman ran the business for over 40 years before he passed away, and then at the family's request, Miss Debbie Gunning took over ownership in 2011. Under Debbie's leadership, I was immediately impressed when I walked into the office by just how warm and cordial everybody was. As soon as I stepped in, I was welcomed, and it felt really nice to be there and to be able to talk to you guys. And as I spoke to Debbie about her accomplishments and the team's accomplishments, she was very specific and told me that it was not necessarily just her, that she would not be here if it wasn't for her amazing team, and that it was their accomplishment just as much as hers. And I thought that really tells you what kind of leader that she is in this office. So in addition, I just want to say that they are part of our community. They have helped out in Habitat for Humanity. They have donated to various charities. And Miss Gunning is also a Girl Scout leader, which probably takes its own special kind of courage. So with that, I really want to thank you for being here and thank you for being in business, and I wish you another 50 years.
Congratulations. We'll next move on to the city manager's report. Mr. Patuchik.
Thank you, Mayor Mueller, members of the council. Our next work session is scheduled for August 8th, 3 p.m. here in the council chambers, and that will be our normal update work session. Just a couple of projects tonight. The Vista Transit Center workstation remodel, which is being funded by a grant through the Arizona Department of Transportation, was awarded to TRK Development, a local company, in the amount of $24,219, and we expect completion of the project by September 30th. Also, we are holding a public auction to sell the property located at 366 East Maccabee Street. That will be held on Friday, August 4th at 11 a.m. in the conference room. Minimum bid for the property is $8,000, and the required deposit is $4,000. If you recall, that was a property donated to us by one of the tribes and then cleaned up. So there are costs associated with that as well that we'll be recouping through the sale. And that's all I have tonight. Thank you, Mayor Mueller.
Thank you, Mr. Patuchik. Any questions on Mr. Patuchik's report? Okay, thank you very much. We now move on to a public hearing item. Item number 2. And Mr. Felix, if you give us a quick report, then we'll open it up to the public.
Yeah. Mayor, members of council, state law does require that the city council hold a public hearing on the property tax levy before the approval of the final budget. And that's what this opening, if anyone wishes to discuss it, meets the requirement of. As follow-up for the work session on Tuesday, the tax rate is remaining the same at 0.1136 per hundred of assessed valuation. The tax amount that is in the budget, because we are keeping the levy amount the same and values have decreased, it is going down 0.8% from $362,147 to $359,240. The maximum allowable property tax levy for 2018 is $559,098 if the city had wished to go to that. The assessed valuation, excluding new construction, dropped 1.6% from 17, or technically 16 to 17, but from the 17 budget to the 18 budget. What that means is that's average across the city for all commercial and residential properties. So on average, if you had a $150,000 house in last fiscal year, it is now worth $147,601 for tax purposes. And the actual tax you would pay on that would go from $17.04 down to $16.77. Now there's been discussion of other entities raising their rates. If the city had wished to keep the levy amount the same, the 362,000, it would have required a raise to our property tax rate from the 1136 to a 1145 per hundred of assessed valuation. So the change of tax on a $150,000 house, if we would have done that, would have been a 14-cent difference from the 1677. But it still would have been less than it was last year because of the accounting for new construction and the calculation of the actual levy amount.
Thank you, Mr. Felix. At this time, I'd like to open this up to the public. If there's anybody that would like to speak to us on this issue, and we're keeping the rate the same, please step forward. I've received no request to speak to us on this issue. And I see nobody moving out there real fast to come forward and speak, so I'll close the issue. This will be back on the agenda again on August 10th, 2017 for final approval by the council.
Does the hearing continue now? or-
The hearing is, the hearing before council is closed,
Okay,
but they can continue to contact us anytime until we do the final vote on August 10th, 2017.
thank you.
Okay? All right. We now move on to new business, and we'll go to item number 3. Mrs. Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that the City Council regular meeting minutes of July 13th, 2017 be approved.
Second,
It's been moved and seconded. Any comments, corrections, additions, deletions? Seeing none, I'll call for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. We now move on to item number 4. Mr. Mount.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I move that Resolution 2017-057 approving the sale and execution and delivery of pledged revenue, refunding obligations to prepaid lease purchase agreements and a purchase agreement of the city, approving the form and authorizing the execution and delivery of necessary documents, delegating authority to determine certain matters with respect to the foregoing, authorizing the taking of all other actions necessary to consummation of the transactions, contemplation by the resolution and declaring an emergency be approved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. I'm glad I didn't have to read that one myself.
No kidding, right?
Mr. Felix, may we have the staff report, please?
Mayor, members of council, excellent job, Councilmember Mount. It was written by our bond attorney, so you, of course, have the bond legalese with that.
Felix, I appreciate that.
This is taking all of our current municipal property corporation bonds. We have 3 series out there, the Series 2008, the Series 2010, and Series 2012, and refinancing them into one new bond issue, which has a tiered principal structure. The interest rates are changing from a 2.66% to a 4+% of the current bonds, the coupon rates they pay. The new interest rate is a level 1.84% through 2026. As well as saving the money on the interest rate, we have also been able to take the bonds that were to pay off in 2023. They will pay off in 2022 now. And the sewer bonds that were scheduled to be completed in 2027 will now be paid off in 2026. The present value savings on the bonds with the little change in interest rate and with applying the current trust balance that we have is $575,000. As we discussed what the net present value is, and that's the value of all the savings over the next 10 years today. And it is a 3% savings when you take the savings versus the amount of the bonds. So this has worked out very well for us, and it's good that we had the market to take advantage of this, and be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Felix, and I'll just note that we had an extensive discussion on this in a couple of work sessions. Comments or questions from council? All right, seeing none. I will mention we do have a citizen that wants to address us tonight on item number 4, Mr. Newcomb.
I don't think you should do this. I think that you have a little bit of time, and that's all. I didn't hear any mention about extending the payment schedule for this as to having the short time that already exists on these separate items. Salman of Arabia has made comments about the United States of America being unreliable. And these are serious comments from someone very important on this planet. LIBOR, that was mentioned in some of this, is currency manipulation. Now, when TARP happened and the bailouts, around the world there were many other nations that followed suit and went and printed up additional money. Of course, there is a lot of money that for other nations around the world that is printed here in the United States of America. But there are problems of transparency when you're doing this kind of stuff. And already there is talk of China and Russia, India, Brazil, and South Africa forming a bank to issue credit to third world nations, as they're called, third world. So when you're going around and you're juggling this money like this, in this United States, you're joining in on throwing up paper into the air and seeing what happens with it. Of course, now this is all domestic, this is happening. But there are problems, I think, with this. Once again, transparency, because one of those bonds was for that police station. Now, transparency shows that the police are getting a raise, they got a new building, you're going to refinance their stuff, you're going to take it all from the toilet, because that's where some of the other money is from. You know, with the sewer fees and all the like. You know, the library just a week or two ago had some stuff scrubbed off of the walls there from the landscaping irrigation that's leaving calcium deposits. I think it would be very wise to not touch these bonds and go into a new finance schedule, because if you're going to look at CAP water, there can't be any question that they're going to want to know that you're not going to do geologic damage by depositing more salts onto the land here by importing CAP water. So I think it's wise to keep the finance the same so that you maintain your transparency, because we really do have a water quality problem here. And as far as I'm concerned, looking into the future, if you people are going to make babies, your babies are going to want to make babies. But if someday all the pipes are filled with calcium and everything, then we will just be nonsense. They'll look at our graves and maybe want to take a leak, because everything will be starting to fail. Gardens will fail. You know, you have food stamps here. You have people who get food stamps here. We are creating a tsunami of effluent towards Benson, an agricultural community, towards St. David, an agricultural community. I think it is wise for us to try and maintain transparency and respect the United States government by trying to tell them that we are also concerned about transparency, that we want to do things right, and we don't want to just be a paper tiger. Because that's what money is a paper tiger. And we need to kind of not jump on board, so we can take the wife out to dinner every night, and all the things that people do nowadays. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Newcomb. Any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, I'll call for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. We now move on to item number 5. Mayor Pro Tem Ash.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that Resolution 2017-058, adoption of the final budget for fiscal year 2017-2018 be approved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Mr. Felix, may we have the staff report, please?
Mayor, members of council, this is the next step in the annual budget process. This is the approval of the final budget. There has been no changes from the tentative budget that was approved in June. The next step in the process will be the approval of the property tax levy in the August 10th meeting. And of course, as you mentioned, anyone who wishes to discuss the property tax can still come forward at that meeting and make any comments they wish to make. There have been no changes, no moves with anything within the budget. The one item that was discussed in the work session is we'll be reviewing the financial policy, and one of the things we'll be adding is the mid-year financial review, and that'll be discussed as you guys go into your strategic planning that you start in the February timeframe, so you can have an update of where we're looking at the mid-year point. So, and that'll be a more formal financial review than we have always done in the past. The past has been a very brief mid-year review, so it'll be a more detailed one than has been done before. Be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Felix. Questions or further discussion? Yeah, I think we've hashed this out for months now, so I think we're okay. We're at the point where we're ready to vote, so I'll call for the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you, and I want to thank David and the staff, Mr. Patuchik, for all the support in getting the budget out. It's always tough when you have a very tight budget, and I want to thank the council members for being frank and open and having some discussions and quite frankly coming up with some good ideas that help save us a little money to get through this time. So a good team effort on everybody's part. We now move to item number 6. Ms. Wolf.
Mr. Mayor, I move that Resolution 2017-059, approval of the updated intergovernmental agreement for the Cochise County Tourism Council Steering Committee be approved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. And Mrs. Jacobs, may we have the staff report, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. For about 20 years, the city has participated in a regional tourism effort where each of the communities and the county, except for Wichita City, have opted to pool their resources in order to make a bigger impact on tourism for the region. There was some discussion last year about and some changes in participation at the staff level, so there were some new ideas floated about how those resources could be better spent. And the decision and recommendation, which is before you today, is to change the fiscal agent from Cochise County to the city of Sierra Vista. And in exchange, some of the resources that are pooled together would be applied to existing city staff, professional staff that are in the marketing and communications division, as well as the addition of a part-time person that would be solely dedicated to the regional tourism effort. That is a significantly more staff time than had been previously able to be afforded by the CCTC through the hiring of an external consultant. 2 of the entities have already passed this IGA, that is the City of Wilcox and Cochise County. With your passage today, then we will follow up with the City of Tombstone, Benson, Bisbee, and Douglas, and we will then pull the Cochise County Tourism Council together, finalize the strategy, and then move forward as the CCTC's agent in implementing that strategy with the resources that they provide. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
And I think, Mary, one piece we discussed that didn't get mentioned was when we start having the executive reports, we'll get updates on the tourism in the executive reports. I think that was requested by council.
Certainly, Mr. Mayor, we'll be happy to do that.
Okay. Any other further comments or further discussion?
I had a question.
Yes, ma'am. Question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just had a quick question. Within the read-ahead packet, it did provide the different contributions from the individual cities, and I was just curious how those contributions are determined. I assume it reflects the different budgets of the different cities, but if you could provide some clarification.
Mr. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem Ash, I wish I could, but this has been the 20-year contribution, and there is no documentation as to how those numbers were originally established. And when we looked in depth to try to put some rhyme or reason behind it, population, budget, resources, we simply weren't able to do it at this point. So the decision was to go ahead and move forward under the existing contributions for now, and then to take some time to see if we can put something that is a little fairer together in the future. So we will be doing that, at which time the IGA would then need to be updated by each of the governing bodies.
Great, thank you.
Yes, sir.
But as it stands right now, this is essentially net neutral to the city. There's no costs for us other than our normal work effort that comes with it. But I am very curious about that as well. I know we're in the clear because we're net neutral, but for their sake, how did they come up with the numbers would be something that I would be very curious to find out. So I look forward to that discussion. Thanks.
Okay. Any other comments or questions, discussion?
Other than I think this is the right move. This is
Okay.
good.
Great. All right, then I'll call for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. We now move on to item number 7. Mr. Mount.
Mr. Mayor, I move that Resolution 2017-0, approval of the intergovernmental agreement with Cochise County Board of Supervisors for the Regional 911 Communications and establishment of a Southeastern Arizona Communications Center be approved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Mrs. Jacobs, may we have a staff report, please?
Certainly. Mr. Mayor, members of council, as you know, the city and Cochise County have been discussing the notion of a combined joint communications, emergency communications center for over 10 years. And it has taken a lot of steps to get to where we are today, mostly made possible over the past several years through some generous donations by a private benefactor, as well as a couple of grants from the governor's office. As a result, the facility is currently been purchased, is under renovation. The towers have been updated, and the infrastructure is in the process of moving forward. So the last step in the process before we can move forward with this joint facility is the identification and implementation of a governing structure for this joint effort. So after significant discussion and input by the two partners, we settled on a Joint Powers Authority, which is a quasi-governmental entity that still is it still sort of serves as a special project under the county, and the county will serve as the fiscal agent. But each of the representatives of the municipal governments and one representative of the fire districts will have a voting member on the governing board, and those voting members will be represented by the chief administrative officers of the municipalities. So the governing board will then be responsible for the oversight, hiring an executive director, and ensuring that the budget is implemented, and since they are the chief administrative officers, that the funding costs and the subscription costs will come back to each governing board on an annual basis at the during the budget process. So it has some protections in it to make sure that the county isn't subsidizing. It will provide up to 2 years for a merger approach to it, as opposed to trying to establish those rates right now. We need to collect some data so we know exactly what it is. And as I mentioned at our last work session, there is definitely some anticipation that the first couple of years may not start by saving us money. It's the addition of the subscribers that will there will be capacity within the staff, so we won't have to staff up with the same number of people, and that's where we'll see those savings over time. So there's already been strong interest on the part of Bisbee and Douglas, and we believe over time there will be the addition of the other communities in Cochise County, but they need some reassurance that their voice will be represented, and that's how the structure of the Joint Powers Authority is intended to provide that reassurance. So there's a lot of detail in the IGA. I know we went over a lot more. I'd be happy to answer any questions, and Chief Thrasher will also be happy to answer any questions about the the merger and any of the technical issues associated with joint dispatching. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Are there questions for the Assistant City Manager on her report? Because we have a citizen that wants to address us on this item.
I just have one comment
Okay.
to make about, it's not exactly a question, but you mentioned the cost savings, and that's extremely important, I know, for us and for the other communities involved. But the safety factor of having this communication center is what impressed me the most for the entire county, how different this will be for the services that are being offered. So I think it's a great effort, and look forward to keeping up with what's going on with it and how it progresses. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, just a quick comment, Mayor, but I do have a question. You know, I value joint communications. I know in the military, you know, having multiple people out there from different branches trying to talk to each other is a pain. So I see this as being a, for lack of better terms, a force multiplier. Will allow us to really utilize those intergovernmental agreements that we already have in place. So from that perspective, I think it's a good call, and we'll see how it matures. The question that I do have is, maybe it's me being more risk averse. If for some reason this just isn't clicking due to however the relationships are working out, or as this thing progresses, do we have the ability to step away and then reacquire our own internal comms?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Mount, yes, that is built into the IGA. Any removal of a particular community from joint dispatch will require the governing board authorization.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we do have one member of the public that would like to address us this evening. Mr. Newcomb.
The 2-year honeymoon thing was a good thing to hear. I have had someone fire some electronic device that would fire a bullet into my stomach. You know, it was photons maybe, or whatever you want to call them. Or they take laser beams and burn the back of my shoulders and my neck. I know some guy that has had people using laser beams on him, and he had a lump on the back of his head on the back of his neck, bigger than my fist is here. In Hidalgo County Jail, there was it was a joke involved a John somebody, the Saturday Night Fever guy, and I made a comment about that, and they took me to the bathroom, were acting like they were going to kick my head, and I blacked out. I blanked out. I woke up. I was in a van, and the cops were asking me, "Do I want to go for some pizza?" Yeah, and but there was no swelling on the side of my head, and they had put sutures in there. There was no cut. I later cut my hair off and found there was no scar there. So I think they had used something through the walls to knock me out. At Cochise County Jail, they have used an electronic device on me through the walls that made my brain feel like I had just stuck my finger into an outlet. They have dust devils that I know are from satellites. I've had lots of teeth knocked out. I know that when I'm outside and I hear the hawk scream, that someone has access to a satellite and is buzzing that hawk so that it screams. Now, all of these are, and there's many, many more things that I told you about with, like Fireman York there, about the knee problem, and there's many, many things that go on. Many, many people put on these uniforms. Many, many people have agenda. And so I'm very glad that there's going to be this 2-year period, because this is a very important thing that you are suggesting. You have a lot of people in the police cars who look like kids to me. a dispatcher sending someone who they don't know up against something they don't know is hugely unfair. And when we have these kind of things that happen to me, and I know it's by people who have access to these devices that only military security would know about, supposedly, then this 2-year period is very important, and I'm hoping that you people have an advocate that cares very much for even those lowly homeless that you want to kick out of the gully. Because that's the kind of people you've been for about 10, 20 years. You know? The people who get run over by the landlords and get run over by the employment and get run over by the women and get run over by their friends. You know, you need to have someone advocate for them so that the suit does not run over them, and then the suit gets out there on that parking lot and talks about the bad guys. Because I know that the suit is just a piece of cloth. Yes, I do.
Thank you, Mr. Newcomb. Any further questions or discussion on this item? Seeing none, I'll call for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. We now move on to item number 8, Mrs. Calhoun.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that Resolution 2017-061, approval of an intergovernmental agreement with the City of Douglas for intercity bus service be approved.
It's been moved and seconded. Ms. Flassard, may we have the staff report, please?
Mr. Mayor, members of council, based on the results of a feasibility study initiated by the Southeastern Arizona Governments Organization, or SEGO, a new intercity transit service will begin operation next month. Called the Cochise Connection, it will connect Douglas, Bisbee, Sierra Vista, and ultimately Benson. And I did want to clarify a point from the work session on Tuesday. The initial plans for 2017 are only between Douglas, Bisbee, and Sierra Vista. The plan is then to expand to Benson in 2018. The Cochise Connection will be managed by the City of Douglas and will operate 6 days per week. The stops in Sierra Vista include the Transit Center, Cochise College, and the Canyon Vista Medical Center. Funding is primarily through the Legacy Foundation. Other funding partners include SEGO, Freeport-McMoRan, Cochise County, and the Arizona Department of Transportation. The contribution from the City of Sierra Vista is limited to in-kind and billable services only. Through this IGA, the city will sell passes for the Cochise Connection at the Transit Center and remit payment to the City of Douglas. The Cochise Connection will also utilize existing city bus stops at the Transit Center, Cochise College, and Canyon Vista. Fleet repairs may be provided on a billable and as-needed basis, depending on other priorities within the fleet section. And the IGA is renewable on an annual basis. There are several representatives here from the Cochise Connection if you have any specific questions on the service, and I would be happy to answer any questions you have on the IGA.
Thank you very much, Ms. Flassard. Any questions or discussion? Again, we went through this fairly thoroughly. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. We'll now move on to item number 9. Ms. Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that Resolution 2017-062, appointment of Suzanne Trimbath and Sid Downey to the Industrial Development Authority, said terms to expire December 31st, 2023, be approved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion?
I see Mr. Downey and Suzanne is back there too, so they are in the audience. Thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion? All right, I'll call for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? It's unanimous. Congratulations. We now move to item number 10, Mayor Pro Tem Ash.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that Resolution 2017-063, appointment of Elizabeth Heinrich and Madison Monbleu to the Youth Commission, said terms to expire December 31st, 2017, be approved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion or comments?
Madison, raise your hand. She's here in the
Thanks,
audience.
Madison, for coming. Any folks?
Yes, and her folks are here as well. And I did want to add, Elizabeth is not here, but she joins a family of Sierra Vista commissioners, including a sister who is on the Youth Commission, and her mother who is on the Arts and Humanities Commission, and one of the founders of Second Saturdays. And Madison, I've learned, is basically a ninja. Is it karate or taekwondo? Taekwondo. Yes, she's highly skilled in taekwondo. So we're happy to have both of them on the Youth Commission.
So thanks for the warning. We won't mess with Madison. Okay. Any further discussion? I'll call for the question. All those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. We have no other people that have signed up to address us for a call to the public. So we'll move on to comments and requests by council. And we start tonight with Mr. Blanchard.
I have nothing.
Thank you, Mr. Blanchard. Ms. Wolf.
Once again, I just want to congratulate Executive Realty. It's quite a feat. I am happy to see Miss Madison in the audience, and good luck to you. I hope you have an enjoyable time. And I just really want to appreciate everybody's effort on the budget. And I think we can agree as a council that now we can sort of get into some other things that we really want to talk about and address some other issues. So, and as always, be safe.
Thank you, Ms. Wolf. Mrs. Gray. Thank you, Mrs. Gray. Mr. Mount.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, just briefly, again, also I thank everybody for their work on the budget. I know that probably the sign of a good budget is that not everybody got what they wanted. I know that there were several of us that pushed real hard for things that we necessarily didn't get, and a lot of us got what we did want, but ultimately I think it's a budget that helps us solve problems for the next year. I'm extremely grateful to council and also to Chuck and staff for the change to the fiscal policy. I think that's going to allow us to be adaptable and flexible going forward. So I think that's a good thing. And then I also know that with the public, you know, although this was a unanimous vote, voices were heard, you know, whether they lived in the city, whether they lived in the county, in the surrounding community. But sometimes we do have to stand up here and go ahead and make the vote to get the thing moving. But we hear the concerns, and we know that there's still more work to do and more improvements to be made. And we'll have a good budget this year to kind of work off of to get those things done. With that being said, Mayor, I appreciate your time, and thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mr. Mount. Mrs. Calhoun.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to thank Pastor Brown for the prayer he said for us today. It evoked some beautiful some pictures of our lovely city and the area, and I was really moved by his prayer. I also want to say congratulations again to Executive Realty. 50 years in service is no small feat, and takes all of the things that you said, Christine, that really makes a business successful. We have many in the community and look forward to, as you said, 50 more years for Executive Realty, but get to 50 years for many of our businesses that are in the community. I also hope that Cochise Connections gets well used and is able to sustain over the years. I know it's been requested, wanted for many, many years, and I want to thank Legacy and the other sponsors and supporters of that program, including Arizona Department of Transportation, for making it possible, and I sure hope it works. I intend to ride it just to see it and to travel the county. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Calhoun. Mayor Pro Tem Ash.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I, of course, echo the comments that have been shared before me. Thank you again to Madison for your service on the Youth Commission. And I would just like to make note that I did have the opportunity to speak to the Sierra Vista Hispanic Chamber yesterday on behalf of the mayor. And I wanted to share that probably the loudest cheers that I received was when I mentioned that we have hired Tony Boone as our economic development manager, and the fact that we have put a moratorium on development fees. So just wanted to share that with everybody.
Thank you, Ms. Ash. And I just have one comment. Before we meet again here in City Council for an official meeting, school will be in session. So in the next couple of weeks, in early August, please drive carefully because those youngsters are going to have other things on their mind while they're getting to and from school. So be very careful with your driving. We obviously don't want to have any tragedies with our young folks out there. So, seeing no other business before council, meeting is adjourned.